listening to Shop Talk with your host, Kevin Tetz. Brought to you by Eastwood Tools. Everything you need to do the job right.
Hey Gearheads, you're listening to Shop Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Tetz. This is brought to you by the Eastwood Company. Do the job right with Eastwood. Today, we get to talk with a guy that not only loves the automotive hobby, but he loves life. We're talking about Jerry Dixey from Street Rodder magazine. He's got a 20-year history with Street Rodder, and he's logged hundreds of thousands of miles coast to coast across the country in awesome cars. And we're talking about the Street Rodder Road Tours. He's instrumental in that, bringing that availability to the rest of us. As well as, he's been very well honored in the industry. The NSRA bestowed him the Street Rodding Achievement Award in 2012, and he talks a little bit about that, as well as the founding fathers of hot rodding. Jerry's one of those guys that you can't help but like just by talking to him. So pull up a chair, take a listen. This is Jerry Dixey. You are listening to Shop Talk, brought to you by the Eastwood Company, makers of fine automotive tools and equipment. Do the job right with Eastwood. Well, today we've got Jerry Dixey from Street Rodder magazine with us. Jerry is the real deal. Not only is he an automotive journalist, and I'm sure you've read his stuff if you've ever read Street Rodder magazine, but he's a gearhead car guy, and he's got dirt under his fingernails, and he likes to prove it. Jerry, how are you doing today?
Kevin, I'm doing great, and I'm blushing. What a review of my career so far that you've given me. Yeah, I guess I'm all that. I'm all that stuff. Not as much grease under the fingernails, more ink under my fingernails, I guess. But yeah.
Well, you know, at least you're getting dirty.
Yeah.
So, first of all, tell our listeners a little bit about your background with Street Rodder magazine. I know Street Rodder's been a book for a little bit better than 40 years now. How long have you been involved?
I've been writing for Street Rodder magazine for 20 years.
Wow.
We started doing freelance work I did for Street Rodder back in 1989. I was involved in the pedal car craze and the antique gas pumps and neon clocks, things like that. And I started a company in 1989 called Classic Automobilia, and we sold those items. And I suggested to the then editor of Street Rodder, Tom Vogley, I said, gee, Tom, and I had not met Tom, but I saw him in a show, and I said, hey, you ought to do an article about pedal cars. And he gave me an answer that I found out later was his standard response to anyone that suggested, why don't you do an article on? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and said, you look to be the expert, why don't you write the article? Little did he know who he was talking to. So I think it was the March 1992 issue of Street Rodder contained 4 articles that I wrote about customizing little pedal cars and hopping them up and the history of them and that sort of thing. I got to be very tight with the magazine. I did articles on gas pumps, road maps, and then in 1993, I did, with the help of my late great friend Barry Lobeck out of Cleveland, Ohio, we did my own 1934 Ford 4-door sedan deluxe as a 3-part build for Street Rodder called the Presto Rod. And that worked out very well, and they liked the way I wrote. And I came up in 1995 with the idea of the road tour, to drive a car around the United States showing that it's safe and fun, and how to get out and get them off the trailer and really enjoy them.
Right. Well, the phrase that everybody throws around is trailer queen, and you are the antithesis of that. So, how many, what is it, 375,000 miles that you logged in open cars?
The last time I checked my odometer, it was, my body odometer, we'll call it, 375,000 miles since 1996, the beginning of the road tour. And it's been fun. I like to say some of it's magic and some of it's tragic. We've had a great time putting those miles on.
Well, and there's no way that you can't be a car guy doing that type of stuff with a bunch of similar folks, with similar vehicles and street rods. You got to know how to fix these things. I mean, so to me that legitimizes you in one fell swoop, my friend.
Well, there has been a lot of a learning curve that has come around to me, and you have to learn how to diagnose things and what to fix and when to call for help. You can do some things, but fortunately, with the quality of the parts that we use and the people that build our cars, I have a fantastic car every year, and there's never any Major problems, but as you know, Kevin, anybody that's ever built a car, they're hand-built. Things come loose. Things
come loose.
It's
a process, isn't it? It's a constant refinement process.
Yeah, and again, we have so much fun out there on the road tour. It's a great program.
Well, you've also been honored recently, if I'm allowed to wax on your achievements. The NSRA bestowed upon you a very great honor. Can you tell us about that?
That was fun. That was last November at the SEMA show, and the National Street Rod Association gives an award out called the Street Rodder Appreciation Award, and this year it was me, and I had a great time getting up in front of the crowd, and they waited with bated breath as to what I was going to say. But I was.
Oh, you're that guy. Okay.
Yeah. They knew that I would not be in lacking for things to talk about. But I got up and I thanked my wife. I was glad my wife of 42 years, Mary Ann, was in the audience, and I could thank her. I said, "You guys have known me for 17. She's been with me for 42. How would you like to be that, huh?" That's a long time to spend with me. But it was appreciated. I go way back with the NSRA. From 1996 to 2005, I attended every National Street Rod Association event in the United States driving a street rod. That's 111 of them, my friend.
Wow. Well, that's a heck of an accomplishment, and congratulations for that. And congratulations on your long marriage. My wife and I have been married for 24 years, and she gets me, and I know your wife gets you, and that's got to be very comforting to know that you're making your journey through life with somebody that supports your sickness.
Well, and she understands. We operated a business together, Ohio Van and Truck Supply, for 30 years. We did van conversions and accessories. And she ran the office, and I ran the front. And when we came home, if we were in a bad mood, we both knew why we were in a bad mood because we had lived it that day. And if we were in a good mood, we understood. So it's really nice to find somebody that you can spend 24 hours a day with and be happy. That's fantastic.
Well, good for you. Well, let me back up just a little bit. Now, there's guys that are listening to us that understand completely what a street rod is. There's guys that are listening to us that may not know that it's a specific category of vehicle. So, Education 101 here, Jerry. What is a street rod?
Well, by definition, as of 7 years ago, a street rod, by most people's definition, was a pre-1948 bodied hot rod, high-performance car. That 48 year had been set by, I guess I would go back and say the National Street Rod Association. 1948, if you're familiar at all with the body style, that was the last year of the fat fenders. In 1949, Ford went to the shoebox, which the fenders were incorporated into the body. So the fellows that were kind of quote-unquote making the rules back then decided, let's make this 48 and earlier. And that was the way it was for quite a few years, for probably 30, 35 years. Things changed. There are events now that welcome up to 72. The NSRA has a sliding scale of 30 years. By our definition for Street Rodder magazine now, if you've looked editorial at our book lately, we've moved up into the 50s and the 60s, the early 60s, big-bodied cars.
Right.
We feel that you can make a higher-performance vehicle out of those 50s and 60s cars as easy as you can a pre-48 car. And as our demographic, two things are happening. Our original demographic, the folks are a little bit older. Hard to fold up into a deuce high boy, my friend. I've been doing it for a while. And when you're 62 years old, it's a little bit harder. So you like to get in something that's more comfortable. And then you get into the full-bodied cars in the 50s and the 60s cars. Believe me, the 32 Ford Highboy Roadster is still the iconic hot rod. In my money, for my money, that is.
Well, and it always will be, but I like the fact that the parameters are stretching as we get older, as the cars get older, because cars are like baseball. They just are. They're markers in time that we can look back at. And as we get older, the newer cars, well, into the 60s, and, when I was growing up, those cars were new. And it's nice to see that they're considered classics as well as being morphed into the street rod category. So I personally like that.
Oh, I think so too. And the other thing that it's done is it's brought more people into our hobby. Somebody that's younger, somebody that's in their 40s, they can relate to a 50s and a 60s car. Maybe the older fella down the street, the Fonzie down the road, he had a car from the 50s and 60s, and a younger person can relate to that. The other thing that's happened is that with the popularity of the pickup trucks, you of all people know about trucks.
Absolutely,
with the pickup trucks, they're rather inexpensive for a young person to get into our hobby. You know, there's always been kind of a standing thing about why don't more young people get involved in street rodding? And my response is, do you want to sell that young person your 32 Ford for $20,000? Well, the response back is, no, I've got $65,000 in it. And I said, we've priced them out of the market somewhat. And by moving it up to the 50s and 60s, we've been able to make other vehicle platforms available to a young fellow that's raising a family. And he might have $20,000, but he doesn't have a ton of money to spend on a early traditional street rod.
Right, and someday he might, and arguably he probably will. But for entry level, you've not only increased those parameters to have the vehicles themselves more accessible, but the reproduction parts that are available for them are less expensive and more readily available as well. You know, you get a 48 Cadillac. Where are you going to buy a grill? You're not. You're gonna find one. You're gonna have it re-chromed. But you know, a 48 Chevy pickup. Well, guess what? You can buy a brand new grill from a handful of parts vendors and put that sucker in there. Of course, they come in 72 pieces. Beware, you're going to have to build the sucker, but you can buy it new, and that's a beautiful thing to me.
Oh, sure, and you can go out and you can find these trucks. I remember back, and I grew up in Ohio. I'm a Midwest boy. So the first time I ever went out west on the road tour in 1996, one of our first events was Bakersfield, California. And as I drove around the streets of Bakersfield, I thought to myself, wow, all these people have collector pickup trucks in their front yards or in their driveway. And then I realized, no, this is their trucks. This is their drivers.
It's what they drive.
And the weather's good. The trucks last a long time. So they're quite plentiful, especially down south, out west, in the Southwest. So a young fellow can go buy something and move into that. And we cover a lot of that in Street Rodder. We have sister publications, Classic Trucks, Custom Classic Trucks, that cover that whole area of the hobby.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting how these genres are morphing, too. I'm a big Pro Touring fan. I've got a Pro Touring 66 Mustang Coupe with a supercharged fuel-injected engine, T56 six-speed, big brake package, the whole nine. I love this little car. I also love street rods. And at the Good Guys event in Nashville, the Nashville Nationals, I was out there at the autocross, beating the crap out of my car, and Jeff Schwartz pulls up from Schwartz Performance. Jeff is huge in the LS engine industry. He was a professional race driver, and he makes chassis for 20 different vehicle platforms, one of which is under my car. It's a full-frame chassis for early Mustang. It's a really neat setup. But he pulls up in this 50 model Chevy pickup, baby blue in color with a white top. It's got a 4.8 LS in it, one of his chassis under it, and just a stock engine. He put a cold air kit on it, put some headers on it, and threw a little tune in it. And you know, that's the ugly duckling LS. And this thing, he put it on the autocross, and he ripped off 3 seconds off of the guy's times that he was running up against. And,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, there's a lot of crossover, Kevin, in that. We Brian Brennan, our editor at Street Rodder, his column this month, the issue that's on the newsstand, he talks about high performance handling and how it's being embraced by the traditional quote unquote street rod guys. And that's what's happening. We realize that we can get the go out of these crate motors. You can go really fast, but you want to handle. You want to be able to reel them in. You need the whoa besides the go. And so you're putting brake kits on them, and it's a whole nother area that can be enjoyed besides the beautiful styling. Let's make them perform well, too. Last year's car on the road tour was built by Troy Ladd at Hollywood Hot Rods in Burbank.
Yeah.
And it was a 40 Ford, one of Dennis Carpenter's steel body 40 Fords. And it had a Coyote motor under the hood. And Fat Man Fabrications down in Charlotte built us a chassis. And we competed in the Optima Battery Challenge. the day after
of course
the
you
SEMA
did.
show. I mean, it just.
Of course you did. Yes.
And we kicked him in the design competition, and Nick Licata, our driver and Camaro performance editor, Nick got behind the wheel and held his own with a lot of them. Of course, Mark Stilo was out there at the head of the pack.
Well,
but,
yeah. I know Mark, and I respect and admire him, and he's a great guy to talk to as well. But that's one of the things that made me excited about talking to you today, Jerry. And by the way, we're talking to Jerry Dixey from Street Rodder Magazine here on Shop Talk, and Jerry's your quintessential street rodder. I don't mind saying that out loud.
Appreciate
but one of the cool things, no worries, absolutely, and you've earned it. And one of the cool things that Street Rodder does are the road tours. And I wanted to ask you about that, but before I let you speak, I just wanted to say congratulations both to the book and to you for making this happen, because everybody can appreciate a car standing there with a lawn chair parked beside it and a cooler full of cold ones. But to see these vehicles on the road, it makes you smile when you see them go by. You give the thumbs up. It puts these cars where they need to be. So thank you for perpetuating this road tour and keeping this alive, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. One of the things that I found out early on when I was traveling, for the first 10 years of the road tour as we know it, the first 10 years, I traveled basically by myself. Marianne went with me occasionally. A friend would jump in the passenger seat with me. But I was out on the road going to the NSRA events on my own, and I would write about it. And we had the readers writing in going, well, when I get the time, I want to live the life that Jerry's leading. I want to do that. That seems like so much fun. So 10 years into the program, in 2006, we changed it up a little bit and invited the readers to travel with us.
Nice.
It changed my life. The dynamic of being on the road by yourself is a lot different than being on the road with 40 other cars. But
yeah.
I really got to enjoy the traveling. Not that I didn't enjoy it in the previous 10, but I was notorious for getting behind the wheel and driving 800 miles a day. And yeah, I know. And hey, how about in an open car? That explains everything, right? I did 3 years of open cars, 25,000 miles a summer. But when it was just me, I would go till the sun went down. I used to get up an hour before dawn, and I always said, just a little tip for the listeners: if you're going to have to travel a long distance, take your darkness in the morning. Get up an hour before dawn. You break down at 4 in the morning, that big old sun's coming up in 2 hours. You break down at 10 o'clock at night, you got a long wait on the side of the road. So
yes, sir, not to mention fatigue, and that's a major factor too, along.
Yep, when that sun goes down, I usually would find a place to stop. But with the new concept of people traveling with us, I was not forced, but it was a necessity for me to make plans ahead. And we can visit places. We have been into some of the most fantastic private collections and wonderful automotive museums in this country. Car shops, street rod shops. We go from an event to an event and spend the week in between enjoying our cars. And you find that when you get to an event where there's 10,000 cars, you're one of 10,000. When you're pulled into a rest area, you're one of 25 or 30 cars when you're on the road tour, and you are the center of attention. It is a lot. It's a lot. It's a great way to enjoy your vehicle.
Very cool, very cool. Well, let's talk about the Eastwood Company. I know you've been working with them on their blog, and actually their Summer Classic Car Show is integrated into the road tour, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. We've been partnered with the Eastwood Company for the last 3 years on the road tour. And I know you've had an association. I know you use their product. Our builders, if you follow the last couple of issues of Street Rodder Magazine, Honest Charlie's Garage, Greg Cunningham and the crew down in Chattanooga, just finished the work on our shoebox, our 1951 Ford. And the last 3 issues of Street Rodder have covered the body modifications. And the word Eastwood comes up every other sentence because they use so many of their body working tools that Eastwood carries. And the Eastwood Company is, I love them. Brian and Nick and the crew, the team that are out there in Pottstown, when they get involved with something, they jump in with both feet. And they said,
yes, we're
going to do this. If we're going to do this and get involved with the road tour, let's kick it off at our facility in Pottstown. and let's have a car show. And they came up with the Eastwood Summer Classic, and this will be the third year for the Eastwood Summer Classic, and they promote it locally. We promote it, of course, in the magazine nationally. The first year we had probably 375 cars in the front lawn at the Eastwood Company in Pottstown, and that's a great turnout for a Saturday afternoon show.
Yes,
they got to see
is.
the cars I was driving, the cars that were on the road tour, and we're doing it again this year. It's Saturday, July the 13th is the Eastwood Summer Classic. Everybody's invited. There's no charge for spectators. They have a minimal, I think, $5 entry fee, and you get a goodie bag, and they're even going to give me the mic for the whole afternoon, Kevin. That's worth the price of admission. Yeah.
Oh, no.
The people that know me go, don't give him a microphone. Stop.
That's funny.
But,
well, Eastwood also does workshops and seminars, and they're, one of the things I like about them so much is that they're focused on education and not only selling people stuff, because that's what they do, but they also want to educate and improve your skill set. So that's one of the cool things about people. If you're thinking about going to the Summer Classic in July, that's another good reason to go.
Yeah, they have seminars all day long. They show you how to use the tools, and you're exactly right about teaching people. There's many of us that have sat and watched craftsmen over the years and go, boy, I wish I could do that. Well, it takes more than just the tools. It takes a little bit of background, and that's what Eastwood realizes is you have to show people how to use them. So they have great videos. Their website is fantastic. It's a great company, and we're really proud to be associated with them. They do a good job.
They do a good job, and I've been associated with them on a business level with Paintucation since 1999. But I've been an Eastwood customer for many years before that, buying tools for my personal toolbox. And, the friendship that we've grown over the years, not only educating their customers to restoration techniques, but also empowering people to not be afraid and not be intimidated by the skill set that they may not possess today, but they can certainly work their way into tomorrow. And, that's one of the things that I like so much about Street Rodder magazines. Your tech articles are really, really good in the book. So well done on that. I write tech. I've been a freelance journalist for a long time, and I look at them with different eyes, having known how difficult it is to not only get the great pictures, but also to have educational captions and subjects that people are interested in. And you guys, man, you nail it.
Well, that's one of the things that Brian Brennan, our editor, has been on board with us since 1998. And a little bit of an interesting side note, Brian started with Street Rodder magazine in 1972, fresh out of college. And he worked for a year on that magazine with Tex Smith, went on to some other magazines, some other areas, came back to Street Rodder in 1998. But Brian has always been a big proponent of tech articles. People want to see how these things are done. And so we always focus on, it's a delicate balance in a magazine. Some people want to see finished high-end cars. Some people want to see the traditional style. Some folks want tech articles. So it's a real challenge to get the balance. And I think, by our subscription numbers, we kind of hit it on the head and got the correct balance of tech with features and insight.
Speaking of numbers, speaking of demographics, I don't know if it's a sensitive subject for you, but it's certainly on my mind. I love magazines. I've got some of my dad's. I think I've got a Street Rodder magazine from a long time ago, but I've got some of the magazines, the early custom Rodder books, like the half-size books.
Oh, sure. The small. They call them the little pages, the small ones.
Yeah. From when he was a teenager, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth and learned about people like Dean Jeffries and George Barris and what a Frenching a headlight was, and I want to see magazines stay on the newsstands, and I wanted to ask your opinion on that. I know there's been some stuff going on, the advent of the internet, TV shows doing what magazines and filling, basically diluting an existing audience to different formats and maybe shrinking yours. So I wanted your thoughts on how the magazine industry is as a whole and how Street Rodder is doing now.
Well, obviously, as you said, the internet's changed our lives in every way. In the magazine, the publishing business, it's changed things, yes. with our demographic, with Street Rodder magazine being traditionally our readers being skewed a little bit older, 45 and up, maybe 50 and up, we grew up with magazines in our hand. I can remember going down to the drugstore at Brown's Drugstore in Canfield, Ohio, where I grew up, and sitting and kind of flipping through until they tossed me out and said, buy it, or you're going to have to stop looking at it, and looking at the magazines. We grew up with magazines in our hand. A magazine you can keep on file. A 32 Ford is a 32 Ford 15, 20, 30 years ago, and it will be 30 years from now. If there's an article about doing something on that car, you can always go back and reference it. Of course you can on the Internet, but people don't usually save that stuff. I have a collection of magazines. I've got every hot rod magazine from 1948. July of 1948. The first 6 are very, very expensive, but up to now. And you keep them and you look at them. I think that while the Internet has changed some of the other demographics with some of the other magazine titles, Street Rodder, there will always be a Street Rodder magazine as long as there are Street Rodders, because we like to have the book in our hand, and I think you had mentioned at one point flipping the pages. I mean, that's what you want to do, and so we're very comfortable. It takes a little bit of changing. You have to be a little bit more up to date and current. It's not instant like the Internet, but again, you can't get a product out instantly that's as polished as what I'm proud to say is an example of Street Rodder magazine. It takes a while to do that.
Well, and you guys, as well as other, not just Source Interlink magazines, but other magazines out there, you're integrating the web, and I think you're doing it well with blogs, with stuff that normally you don't have the real estate inside the magazine. So, it can be, I'm a cup half full guy, Jerry. I see the silver lining. I'm an optimist. I can't help it. I was born with that DNA. Drives some people nuts, but I see both worlds existing and existing for a long time.
One of the things that I do when I'm on the road with the tours is every night I'm up in my room and I'm posting a blog talking about what we did that day. On that update, I can put 50 or 60 pictures of just what we saw that afternoon, somebody's fantastic collection, the people that travel with us. We don't have that luxury in the size of a magazine. Even though Street Rodder's huge, we've only got a limited amount of space to cover a week's worth of activities on the road tour. But if somebody goes to streetrodder.com, clicks on the road tour section, they can see what we did on the road tour that afternoon. And so, it is a nice combination. You use both.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, why don't you talk a little bit about the road tour this year? Somebody that maybe is listening to us and wants to be a part of it, wants to maybe drive up to where you guys are, meet you. How does that happen, and where does it start?
Well, we just completed the first tour from the Hot Rod Reunion in Bowling Green to Back to the 50s in St. Paul. Have you ever been to the Back to the 50s event, Kevin?
No, I haven't, and I got to go.
12,300 pre-1964 vehicles. So an unbelievable event at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. We always start at an event, and spend the week. The next up is the Eastwood Tour. We're going to start in Pottstown, Pennsylvania at the aforementioned Eastwood Summer Classic. We'll spend the weekend in Pottstown. We're going to do the car show on Saturday. We have some great private museum tours on Friday prior. On the Sunday after, we're going to Philadelphia to the Simeon Sports Car Museum in Philly. And we always like to throw a little history in, so we're going to go to Valley Forge on our way back and check out where George and his men spent a very cold winter, from what I read. And the next day we get up, we head to Port Jervis, an event called Cruise in Port. They got a special get-together that evening they're putting together for us in Port Jervis, New York, and we've stopped there before. Then on to the Woodstock Museum. Special in my heart, as an 18-year-old boy, I sat on the hill at Woodstock in 1969. But that's a whole nother life. True story.
Oh, my God. Oh, that's you, buddy. Wow.
Yeah. So I've been having fun my entire life. I stood on the rim of the Snake River Canyon and saw Evel Knievel put the rocket in too. So that's
now
another story. What did I say the other day? I've been everywhere but the electric chair and seen everything but the wind. I'm a lucky boy, and I love it. At any rate, to continue on the Eastwood Tour, we're going to go to the Baseball Hall of Fame. We're going to the Northeast Classic Car Museum in Norwich, New York, Watkins Glen. the wine country up along the Finger Lakes, and we're headed to the Syracuse Nationals. Huge event at the New York State Fairgrounds. Great event in July. The next tours are back-to-back. Normally, our tours are freestanding. The next tours are back-to-back, and I have dubbed these the bucket list tours because we are going on the Speedway Motors Tour from the NSRA Street Rod Nationals in Louisville to the beginning of Bonneville Speed Weeks at the Salt. And we're going to stop at Speedway and spend a whole day. If anybody has ever had a chance to see Bill Smith's collection at the Smith Museum of American Speed, it is just fantastic. At Speedway Motors. We'll spend a day there. On to Denver. We're going to go visit customizer Bo Huff, Bo's got a great shop up in the canyons of Utah. We've stopped there before. Spend the weekend at Bonneville, and then flip around on the autopalooza.org tour, which goes to the Woodward Dream Cruise. Anybody that's ever heard of the Woodward Dream Cruise, if you got a chance, go. There's 1 million people crawling up and down 13 miles of Woodward Avenue in Detroit. That's a big one. Then
yes, that is a big one.
We do we're into September now. The Vintage Air Tour goes from Vintage Air's headquarters in San Antonio to the Shades of the Past event in Pigeon Forge. The next tour is the Shades of the Past event, which leaves that event, Shades of the Past in Pigeon Forge, and goes to NSRA Kalamazoo. We're going to stop in Nashville, go see a good friend, Troy Trepanier. Some of our listeners might recognize Troy's name. We're going to go visit Troy's shop in Manteno, Illinois, then up to Kalamazoo, and then we're going to flip back around for the third in a row, the Triple Crown. The Easy Street Speed and Custom Tour goes from Kalamazoo to the Charlotte Auto Fair, which is the fall swap meet event at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Visit Dennis Carpenter's shop, Fat Man Fabrications, Jet Hot Coating, a lot of places along the way. So those are 3 in a row. Our season always wraps up on the West Coast.
Right.
And the Sherm's Custom Plating Tour goes from Sacramento to Napa Valley and Santa Rosa, down to Oakland. We're going to visit Steve Moll's shop. We're going to stay in Monterey, one of my favorite parts of the country. Down PCH Highway, Pacific Coast Highway is like a postcard. Every car ad that you've ever seen was probably, many of them filmed going down PCH.
I have driven up the Oregon coast. I know what you're talking about. It's beautiful.
And we are going to end that tour ends up at the NHRA California Hot Rod Reunion at Famoso near Bakersfield, California.
Very good.
So that's how we wrap it. We invite anybody to join us. You register ahead. You can get a registration form. It's not expensive. It's $75. You get a hat and a canvas embroidered goodie bag. But the main thing that you get is you get a chance to spend a week following the maps that I lovingly put together, and you go to all these different places. And we have a great time. It's just, I would suggest it to anybody, and one of the things that we're very, very proud of is 50% of the people on a road tour have been with us before. And
neat, yeah.
That tells you something. They're not coming back if they're not having fun.
So people can go to the magazine website, streetrouter.com, and download the forms?
Yes. Yep, we got the registration form at streetrouter.com. And they can also call the Road Tour hotline, 1-800-664-1362. And they'll get to talk to me because I answer the hotline.
Okay.
I know all the answers. They said, you answer it. You know the answers. So if they have any questions, they're welcome to call that.
Very good. Well, listen, man, I want to dig back into your gray matter. This is something we didn't talk about. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I like to find out kind of where people started with this. But to me, it's interesting what people's very first automotive memory was. What can you pull out of the archives from Jerry Dixey's head? What's your first real hardcore memory of either a street rod or a car or something automotive?
I grew up in an antique car family. In 1960, when I was 9 years old, my father restored my great-grandfather's Model T Ford Wood station wagon.
Oh, wow.
And I spent my youth going to antique car shows. So, yeah, my first memory was the car that was my great-grandfather's. And, by the way, I still have that car. It is my car.
Good for you.
My dad and 9 other guys started, my dad, John Dixey, started the Model T Ford Club of Mahoning County in 1960. So I spent my formative years driving around to Model T club events. Have you ever been in a Model T, Kevin? Have you ever an original one?
You know what? The only Model T I've ever been in, it had a dual quad 283 and headers.
That was an option. As I recall, that was an option that year. It was black, and you want the big block.
Exactly. It was a T-bucket. So to answer your question plainly without sarcasm, no, I have not.
The only reason I ask, and it was a loaded question, a Model T Ford is one of the most difficult vehicles to drive until you get used to it. The gas is a lever on the steering wheel. You control the spark on another lever on the steering wheel. Forward is first gear, is the third pedal from the left. Push it down. Neutral is halfway up. High is all the way up. The brake is on the right-hand side, and the center pedal is reverse. So consequently, I can remember, you talk about memories, going to Model T Ford shows and traveling with a group of Ts, and all of a sudden, if we reach a tall hill, a steep incline, everybody automatically, follow me, turn around and go up the hill in reverse. Because the reverse is a lower gear. The reverse is a much lower gear than low and high. So to see all these T's going backwards up the hill, maybe that was my first memory of me going, Dad, why are we doing this? And he said, I'll explain it to you one day.
Isn't it amazing that you can tell that story in a day and time to where you can press a button on the dash, let go of the controls, and the car parallel parks itself? Oh,
I know. And what, Google has the one that they don't even need us in it.
I know.
That's scary. But it's the T's are just another breed. And I love it to death, and I tried so hard during the 60s to have my dad turn it into the Beach Boys Surf Woody. Dad, we need to put a V8 in it. We need to slam it down, and we need to put big tires. And he would love it, and I love my dad to death. We lost Dad 10 years ago this summer, but he was the car guy. And he looked at me and said, someday you will understand why we really are not going to do that.
Well, good for him for keeping you in line on that one. You know, I'm all for hot rodding and street rodding, but that's more than a car. That's a family heirloom and the foundation of very, very cool memories.
Oh yeah, and I'm very proud to still have it, and I'm kind of getting the hang of driving those T's. My dad always drove it, so I'm kind of getting the hang of it. Quite frankly, I got my own 27 hot rod. I've got a steel original full fendered Roadster with a jag rear end and an all aluminum 215 cubic inch Buick V8 under the hood. So I have my 27 hot rod. We will leave great grandpa's car stock forever.
Yeah. Very good. Well, listen, go to the other end of the spectrum. What's the craziest, weirdest thing that you can recall that's ever happened to you on the road or on a road tour?
Wow. Do we have another 5 hours, Kevin? I know you told me
just
30 to 45 minutes, and I'm sure we're over that. Yeah. Okay, let me give you one of my best memories. My favorite car. People ask me this question a lot. Jerry, what was your favorite car? Or they'll ask me what was the best car. And as a car guy, you know those are two different answers.
Oh, yeah.
Your favorite car was not always the best car. My favorite car, without a doubt, no questions asked, as soon as you ask it, the McMullen Roadster clone that I drove in 1997. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the McMullen Roadster, but it is the iconic 32 Ford, black, moon tank in the front, blower motor, 1,900 pounds, 450 horsepower. And they cut me loose in that in 1997, and I drove it 25,000 miles in all the different weathers, up and down the hills and the heat of the desert and the rain of the Midwest. But we were at Bonneville, and the sun was coming up before Speed Weeks. And a gentleman came up to me. And again, some of your listeners are going to be able to relate to these names and some not. But at sunrise at Bonneville, at the end of the asphalt, a man came up, older gentleman, quite older, and he goes, "Is this Tom's car?" And I said, "No, it's actually Street Rodder Magazine's car. It's a replica. It's a clone of Tom's car." And he goes, "I knew Tom." And I looked, and it was Bob Pearson. Now, Bob Pearson and his brother Dick owned the iconic, the Bonneville Salt Flats car, the Pearson Brothers Coupe, right?
Yeah.
The Pearson Brothers Coupe. Are you familiar with the car, Kevin?
I am, yes.
It's got a mailbox slot for windshield.
Yeah.
So Bob got in, and he said to me, he said, could I take it for a drive? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, have I slipped back in time? It was like I was back in the little pages again.
Yeah,
and I said, of course. I slid over, and he got in this thing. We were at the end of the asphalt, and we were going in towards Wendover. So we're on asphalt.
Yeah.
And he nailed it. Scared the bejesus out of me. Just,
yeah.
And he said, feels pretty good. He goes, you having a good time driving? Yeah. He goes, do you have time for a cup of coffee? On the bend of the asphalt that goes to the salt flats, he had his motor home, and he and his wife, Sandy. I sat there, Kevin, for 2 hours, and Bob Pearson told me some of the most amazing stories of the early years of being at Bonneville on the salt. And the 49ers, they called them. When they first went to Bonneville in 1949, they were called the 49ers. They stayed at Wendover at the Air Force Base for $1 a night. They slept in the bunks, and they raced on the salt. So to be able to get that kind of insight from somebody that lived it, to me, that still gives me chills.
Well, that's something you'll carry with you for the rest of your life, and what a wonderful thing to have been a part of. You know, so many of these guys are just not with us anymore. A good friend of mine, David Steele, was mentored by Tom Sparks, and we lost Tom last year, of course. And you know, he talks about the experience hanging around with those guys and just the wonderful things that they went through. They are hot rodding.
It's important to listen to those guys. And yeah, I've turned into one of them, and yeah, I repeat my stories sometimes. But you know what? It's an oral history that will be gone. Sit down, if you're a younger person, sit down and listen to them. And yeah, we embellish them a little bit, but not a lot. But it's important to hear that stuff.
Yeah, well, you know, there might be a little bit of gray around the temples or whatever, but these guys have high-octane fuel in their veins just like the rest of us, so very cool. Well, Jerry, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your time with us. Is there anybody that you'd like to say hello to or send a plug out to or gotcha or how about it? Anything you want to talk about?
You know what? Just we appreciate all the sponsors on the road tour. We appreciate all the shops that have welcomed us. This is something that helps our sport grow and survive, just like you said. And how about a shout-out to my 88-year-old mother, who I love dearly, obviously, who spent all this time in that Model T with me and my dad. She's still around, and she's smarter than I am and more active than I am, so God bless her.
Absolutely. Well, I'm with you on that. That's fantastic, man. You're listening to Shop Talk. This is Jerry Dixey from Street Rodder Magazine. And if you get the chance, sign up for the road tour, people. If you don't, you go to the NSRA events, go to a car show, sit in the street rod, talk to these cats. It's a wonderful hobby. And, Jerry, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Appreciate you giving me the opportunity, Kevin. I hope to see you on a road tour someday.
I got to get a street rod and build one, don't I?
Bring your Mustang. You're allowed. Come on.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Well, we are listening to Shop Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Tetz, and we are brought to you by the Eastwood Company, makers of fine automotive tools and equipment. Do the job right with Eastwood. Well, if you enjoyed listening to that, be sure to catch up with Jerry either with the Eastwood Company blog or with Street Rodder Magazine. And don't forget, the road tour that kicks off at the Eastwood Summer Classic, well, there's a $1,000 tool sweepstakes on every stop of that road tour. So it may actually do you some good to meet up with this guy. So thanks for listening to Shop Talk. I'm your host, Kevin Tetz. Keep your eye on the Eastwood website. There's lots of cool stuff coming down the pike. And so until next time, thanks for listening to Shop Talk. We'll see you down the road. In the meantime, check out everything at the Eastwood.com website. Eastwood has what it takes to do the job right. And you know me, I like to do the job right. Thanks for listening to Shop Talk. I'm Kevin Tetz.